Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. U.S. Senator Tom Udall began serving as United States Senator in 2009, after 2 decades of public service as U.S. Representative and New Mexico State Attorney General. He was re-elected to the U.S. Senate in 2014, is now New Mexico's senior senator. He is our guest today on Fronteras, a Changing America. Senator Tom Udall, thank you for coming back and always making yourself available to KRWG.
You bet. It's a real pleasure, and I always enjoy my days down here in southern New Mexico, and I always want to spend more time. And this is a pretty special place.
What are you doing in southern New Mexico right now?
Well, one of the issues that is very big is border and border trade. I'm giving a speech today to the Border Industrial Association. They're very worried. Many of these business people have been working a long time in building the border economy. The President Trump's NAFTA proposal, at first he said he's just going to tear NAFTA up. Now they're talking about trying to change it, but it's taken a long time. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I wanted to get down there and see how things are on the ground and give them an update and a report as to what's happening on NAFTA.
You were first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2008 and started serving in 2009. However, you were as a U.S. representative going back to 1998. What changes have you seen in Washington, D.C.? Has it changed for the better?
I don't think it has changed for the better, and I think the partisanship, the bickering, the things that people see in the media, people don't like that. They want to see us working with each other. They want to see bipartisanship. And what they see is the failure of the bipartisanship to work. I mean, in the recent case of the Dreamers and border security and how do you handle family immigration and those kinds of things, they've just, we were unable to get anything out of the Senate. The House won't even try to make an attempt, and so, and the President blew up his own proposal. So people want us to focus on what I would call kitchen table issues. Jobs and economic growth, health care, getting a health care system where we can have every one of our citizens involved, and then education. I mean, the real opportunity in America is you get a good education, you're going to get a good job and have a good future. So those are the things I think people want us to focus on. We've had some small successes, but we haven't been able to do the kinds of things that I think we should. The one thing that stands out is President Obama's Affordable Care Act. That was a major step forward to get a lot of people into health care. New Mexico, we're probably insuring now 300,000 people that didn't have health care, ever have it before. They're now in the health care system, and that's a wonderful thing.
There seems to be such a division in our country. I remember about 10 years ago when Facebook came around, and I used to be able to log on to Facebook and see pictures of kittens, of children, of happy things. Nowadays, when I log on to Facebook and social media, there's nothing but division, conversation going on. And with the recent indictments that Mueller came out with, accusing Russia of interfering and showing evidence that Russians were the ones that are causing some of this division.
Yeah.
Is there a way to unite this country and get away from such divisiveness?
Yeah, we could unite around all those kitchen table issues I talked about jobs and education and healthcare. We could really unite the country, and I think any other president would have used this as an opportunity. We're attacked by Russia in our elections. They've taken some of our divisive issues and they pushed them further to try to divide us. And unfortunately, President Trump won't engage at all, even though everybody knows and all his intelligence agencies have been out there and said, look at this. This is absolutely amazing. 17 agencies said the Russians interfered in our elections and we're not doing anything about it.
What are the most divisive issues that's out there right now is the issue of gun violence. And it's such a divisive issue, a very passionate issue. What changes do you propose to protect people from gun violence? And one of the suggestions that's out there right now is to arm teachers. Is that a consideration on your part?
Yeah. First of all, when you weigh into the gun issue, the thing that's important is recognizing that people in the United States have Second Amendment rights, and that's been recognized by the Supreme Court, and people can read the Second Amendment and see what it means. Also, I've always thought that, especially in these big rural areas in New Mexico, people have a right to have a gun for their own protection, and they protect their family, protect their property, that kind of thing. But when you start right there and then move on, I just find it remarkable the common sense things we aren't doing. And I've been on many of these proposals for years. I mean, whether it's expanded background checks, making sure somebody doesn't have a criminal record, they're not adjudicated mentally ill. We have so many people in the country that get out of the service where the service has said they're unstable. Their names are not in the background check, so they can go out and buy. Now, this very small number of people, I mean, our veterans are fantastic people, but we need to get that system working better. I'm not sure that the thing to do is totally arm our schools. I mean, this last shooting, we had a officer that was there that was part of the school security system, and he heard this semi-automatic rifle going off, and he was terrified and he didn't go in. He just waited outside for 5 minutes, and that's understandable. I don't think you're going to be able to arm in such a way at a school, at a particular school, and in many cases we find that people that have guns run into problems in using the guns and things like that more than using them for actual protection. And so we need to see people being really well trained when it comes to handling the guns. But I don't think arming up and loading our schools up with guns is the way to go.
Let's talk about New Mexico priorities, which is something that you've been elected to address in Washington. What New Mexico priorities have you taken to Washington to address? As you know, New Mexico has come out dead last on a lot of issues, childhood and also education. What issues are you taking to Washington for Washington to address?
You bet. And I really feel, being New Mexico's senator, I'm first of all the ambassador to sell New Mexico. New Mexico is a wonderful state. There's so many things going on here, great universities like the University of New Mexico and New Mexico State, and so I talk a lot about how New Mexico has great opportunities and businesses and people should come and locate here. But the things that we've been fighting for the years I've been in Congress is, first of all, getting everybody health care. You know, one of the most important things about our country is that the country and the people want to move forward on health care. And that's why this Affordable Care Act was so important. We saw 300,000 people in New Mexico, new people on insurance. If you have healthy families, you're going to have healthy kids. Those kids are going to be able to learn and be productive. On the education front, we've been working hard at pushing up the dollars. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. One of the things you need in our schools is better teacher training. You need to try to do something to target monies at Title I kids, the kids that are disadvantaged, that are at risk. We bring in a lot of money into New Mexico for that. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. It helps boost what we're doing. I've been a big supporter on early childhood education. Edmundo, as you know, we should start at the youngest age. That's when the people are, those young kids are the most receptive to learning. And if you don't give them a good education at that point and exposure to some of the exposure to music, exposure to toys, exposure to hearing people talking and those kinds of things, they sometimes don't do as well when they start school. And so we should take money out of our rainy day fund and put it into early childhood education. We shouldn't completely drain the rainy day fund, and we should really analyze how we're doing this, but I think that would be a great investment too. And so that's a state legislature issue, but those of us at the federal level have seen that as an opportunity to urge the legislature to do that, and then we're fighting hard to bring money into early childhood education also.
Why is the environment and conservation such a passion for you? It's a passion for your family.
Oh, sure. I think the kind of environmental ethic, conservation, protecting people from toxic chemicals and things like that, it's in our DNA. I mean, I was as a Udall, I was raised out in my dad was raised out in the country on a farm. He took us out almost every vacation from when we were very young to spend time in the outdoors, and I just end up loving it. I get my rejuvenation there, and I think that as I move around New Mexico, people love our public lands, and in some cases, like the national parks, they're loving them to death. There's so many people go there, so we need to have that in mind in terms of how we manage our parks and create more parks and those kinds of things. And so it's, for me, really the top issue is jobs. So many people come here. People don't realize $6 billion is brought in by the tourists that come to New Mexico. That's as big as our state budget. So people that travel here, and the thing I hear from people that travel here, they say, you know, New Mexico has the friendliest people. There are people that want to help you. If you look like you're lost, they ask you, where do you want to go? If you walk into a store, they're incredibly friendly. If you're out on the public lands, you can get advice and direction. And so that's something that is really important. And we're seeing that. A new national monument right in this area in southern New Mexico has boosted the economy. New little businesses have started. They branded those businesses with the national monument's name down here. All of that creates jobs and helps build a stronger community. And I really tout your local officials with the grassroots effort that all weighed in and said to Congress, and this has been going on for years, let's get this done. And I think almost every local official supported the creation of the monument. And now President Trump's undoing the monuments. He's leaving ours alone at this point. Secretary Zinke at the Interior Department talking about some management language, but I think they're leaving the basic boundaries alone, and they've seen us, number one, ready to fight, and two, that there's great public support for them.
Let's talk about an issue that you and I have discussed in the past, and that's the issue of broadband, specifically to rural communities when compared to other nations. Where is broadband at the moment?
Well, Brett, we're in bad shape on broadband, especially in our rural communities. We're one of the, if you establish the really well-off countries in the world, we're way down the list in terms of broadband. But at one point,
America was leading with this.
Yeah, that's right. Early on. What has happened is, in the rural areas, it's more expensive. We haven't found a solution. I mean, I brought millions of dollars into New Mexico over the years I've been in to allow small rural electric co-ops to hook people up. And we're doing a good job, I think, at targeting schools, targeting libraries. But in order for rural communities to survive, we need broadband throughout the community, not just at the schools, the hospitals, and the libraries. And this should be equivalent to when, you know, if you go back in our history, in the 1880s, we built railroads across the country to connect all of us, to open up the market so that people could take goods back east and around the world. And then a little bit later, in the 30s, President Roosevelt said, you know, aren't those rural people entitled to electricity like everybody else? So we had this big rural electrification program. So we had big programs like that. We need to be just as bold right now. We need to step out on broadband and say all those communities should get it, and we should have a national plan to do that. And that's what I've been pushing for a long time.
Infrastructure has been in the news with President Trump proposing an infrastructure plan. What is your opinion on the proposed plan, and where does New Mexico fit into this plan?
On President Trump's overall proposal for infrastructure, it sounded great early on. As he's unveiled the proposal, it ends up he's going with things like toll roads and giving
Privatizing.
Privatizing, ending up taking a couple of big cities I've been in where the citizens are furious. They sell the parking meter system to the private companies, and so then they lose control of their streets, because every time they want to have a march or a parade or a celebration, the company that owns the parking meters said, well, you need to pay us because you're going to shut down the streets and we won't get any parking meter money. So these kinds of efforts are not going to work in New Mexico. I don't think people are going to, if you build a toll road from Albuquerque to Las Cruces, and I don't think people are going to pay a toll to drive on that road. They want to see us step up to the plate and put money into infrastructure and keep the roads in good shape, and we should be doing that. You know, we have an interstate highway system, which is big in New Mexico, almost quarters New Mexico. We need to repair those, we need to maintain them, and we need to do that. And we're seeing the money go down because the whole system has been built on gas taxes. Well, if you're driving an electric vehicle, you're not paying into the system. So we need to really think through these new forms of energy, which are very, and energy less carbon footprint travel with electric cars and things like that, because what's happening is the roads everybody travels on aren't getting the resources they need. And I'm willing to look at everything and work with everybody on that. And this is something that's really important to our country.
As part of the proposal, it's interesting because it changes the way traditionally infrastructure has worked in the past, where in the past up to 80% of the funding would come from the federal government, matched but with 20%. This proposal, from what I understand, is reversed, where the state has to pay 80% and the federal government 20%. Can New Mexico afford that?
Yeah, New Mexico cannot afford it. It's not a good solution for New Mexico. There may be some large cities on the East Coast and on the West Coast that will take the money and try to do something. But the way this is being structured right now, and we're united, Republicans in rural areas, Democrats in rural areas, and the Senate, we're all saying this isn't going to work, and we're going to work with each other to come up with a better plan. And I think it ought to be a $1 trillion plan of investment in infrastructure. And when I include infrastructure, I include renovating our schools, both in our rural communities, out on the Indian reservations in New Mexico. That's tremendously important. I include broadband in that so that we get everybody connected. My belief is that if you have internet and broadband out in rural communities, people are going to start moving back there. We're seeing this trend of people say, I don't want the hassle of living in a big city. I'd like to move out. And more of the economy you can just do you do it on your phone, do it on your computer. You can work from any place. And so we're going to see, I think, a revitalization of rural areas if we can get them connected to the rest. And you talked about in the beginning, what's the difference with other more companies, countries that are more well established? They invest the resources. They just put the resources in there and say, we're going to do this, and they go out and do it. Now, the one difference with many European countries and the United States is we're more spread out. I mean, we have so much land, and those rural areas are not very populated.
Let's talk about Medicare. You've come out in favor of Medicare for all and a single-payer health program. Where do you see that kind of proposal heading? Healthcare debate is, again, one of those hot potato topics.
Yeah.
Where is it now?
Yeah. We've had the Affordable Care Act, which I said is insured more folks. And the debate, unfortunately, under President Trump, he's doing everything he can to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, to kick those 300,000 people in New Mexico that have insurance, that didn't have it, kick them off. In the tax bill, he put a provision to take away one of the proposals that encourage people to get into the healthcare system and to get insurance. And by 1,000 cuts now, he has his health secretary undermining the Affordable Care Act. So where I think we need to go, and this is where I've been for a long time, and I thought the Affordable Care Act was a step in that direction, we got to find a way to get health care for every one of our citizens. Universal health care is where people want us to be. And so I really believe that Democrats and Republicans can come around different proposals to try to move us forward. I've been on the Medicare for All proposal since I was in the House. I've signed up on the Senate proposal. We don't have the votes yet, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep working to expand every year the numbers of people that are covered by health care and have health care.
What are your plans to address long-term comprehensive immigration reform? Do you feel that there's enough votes in the Senate, which has passed comprehensive immigration reform in the past, but the House has always been the obstacle?
Yeah, I still think the votes are there if we can have a process where we work through a piece of legislation and try to allow amendments and allow every senator to be involved in the process. One of the failures of the recent process of only having 4 bills and 4 votes was everybody didn't feel invested. A lot of times if you spend a week or two and you have amendments, say 20, 40 amendments, and at the end of the day your amendments failed, but you watch other amendments you like succeed, and then when you come to the end and it's a vote, shall we move that proposal forward, you've been invested more. And so you decide to move it forward. Unfortunately, the biggest obstacle is the President of the United States. He blew up his own bill. He seems to be opposed to really investing in health care for the American people. As far as I know, he doesn't have any real proposal. And most of our presidents have, if they're interested in health care, they lay out a proposal. They lay out the principles, and then they let Congress get to work. And here we had a real disaster.
Is Washington, D.C. in touch with the needs of its people?
Well, I think each of us, Edmundo, are very in touch with our states. I mean, I travel back here on a frequent basis. I move all around our big state to try to listen to people. I have a number of people in 5 different communities that are on my staff, that are working every day, that are out there reaching out to people in the community, that are doing casework and reporting to me about what's going on. And so I have many avenues between the travel here, between my staff, between our communication, all the social media, the snail mail, the email, I mean, you name it. So we stay in touch and we know what's needed. The blockage is back there in Washington. And it's so unfortunate to see a president who is governing just on the narrow base. I don't think I've seen a president in my lifetime. You know, you run as the head of a party, or you can run as an independent. But after you get elected, this is the way I feel, is I run as a Democrat, but after I get elected, I'm there to govern for everybody.
You have to represent the entire state.
You represent your state, and you represent every one of those people, and you try to listen to them. And unfortunately, this president, every morning he's just stirring up his base of people and trying to make everybody else the enemy. Well, that isn't the way presidents usually govern. As I said, I've never seen this in my lifetime, and it's very, very sad for me that a president would govern like that.
The 2018 elections are coming up. There's an election in the southern part for U.S. representative for District 2. You've got an election happening as a state for a new governor. Are you hopeful that the Democrats will pick up more seats on a national level?
I think we're going to see a big pushback in New Mexico. against some of the governance and things that have gone on. You know, New Mexico hasn't grown as fast as neighboring states, Arizona, Texas, Colorado. I think we're going to see people say, we want better governance, and I think that's going to happen, and there's going to be a big pushback. I also think that's going to happen at the national level. And one of the really positive things is we've now seen a couple of years before, maybe 400 women run, 20,000 women are now running to be elected to office. And women, I've been following local elections around the country, women had been running and taking over school boards. Many of them have been very progressive and moving in a direction that I'm very supportive of. We've been winning some of the elections that are very unusual. You know, we elected a Democrat from Alabama. You know, there hasn't been a Democrat down there for almost 40 years. I mean, this is something that's very, very significant.
Senator Udall, I want to thank you very much for joining us on Fronteras and Changing America, and as always, making yourself available to KRWG.
You bet. You always have a good program down here, and I love to come and visit with you. Edmundo, take care.
Thank you for joining us on Fronteras and Changing America. Have a pleasant week.